interpret it. And when I finished school, I began working on a rock music magazine in England called Zero, and did that for a few years, and also in conjunction with that did freelance work, feature writing for English newspapers like the Daily Express. And I particularly enjoyed, I guess, like investigative feature writing. And then I thought, one day, well, why don't I try and combine the background in investigative journalism with the interest I developed in weird mysteries and so forth, particularly UFOs. And that's basically what started it and sort of set me on this slightly surreal path, I guess.
Yeah, well, slightly surreal. One of the things that sort of gets the room quiet when the testimonies start flying, even at these different conferences and workshops and groups, even when UFO people get together and look at the skies at night, it's when someone brings up the fact that not so much as a bone, a bolt, or a thread of hard evidence on display exists that proves that UFOs are out there. I mean, how did the aspect of contact seem to change the genre from just night sky watching or telling stories of seeing lights in the sky? How did contact seem to change the genre for you?
Well, actually, it's one thing for somebody to say they saw a strange light in the sky, or even a flying saucer-shaped craft in the sky, or somebody in the military tracked it on radar. That's one thing, because it implies what we perceive a UFO to be, a strange, fast-moving object in the sky that defies explanation. But when you start talking about people who claim to have had literal face-to-face contact and interaction with aliens, then that takes it to a whole new level, if you like, and one that in many respects takes it away from the domain of UFOs and literally to direct contact. And I'm sure, most of your listeners, whether they believe in it or not, I'm sure they've heard of the whole alien abduction scenario, this idea of people being kidnapped and from cars and bedrooms and allegedly transported to an alien craft where they're then subjected to, I guess, like distressing medical experimentation, kind of like a lab rat scenario, by these little aliens that everybody, I guess, is familiar with the large heads and big black eyes, this sort of popular culture image of the aliens. That's very much actually more of like a phenomenon that's been prevalent within the UFO research field for the last 20 or 30 years. But if you go back to the early years, as I did with my Contactees book, back to the late 40s and 50s, the abduction stories weren't really around to any great degree, if barely at all. Back then you had contact cases where the witnesses claimed to be literally in like face-to-face contact with very human-looking aliens, and actually not in kind of like a lab rat setting. It was almost like a one-to-one meeting of minds. Now, of course, this gets into extremely controversial areas, and as you can probably guess, by the little bit of data I've related so far, that you can probably guess that many of the contactees back then and even today had as many supporters as they did people who were just rolling their eyes, saying, these are just fantasists and cranks, etc. But, as you kind of alluded to at the beginning, the characters and the personalities are kind of what make their stories equally as interesting as the stories, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I know the subject is sort of a natural progression. You look at craft, you realize somebody's got to be at the wheel of that thing, and they're certainly acting in an intelligent manner, darting left and right and playing cat and mouse, as you say, with our own aircraft, who really like to enjoy the sovereignty of their own airspace. They don't like something outmaneuvering them like somebody that's never been on ice skates before. Mm-hmm. But I never really realized that until just this moment. You're right. The aspect of contact, the style of contact, mm-hmm. The whole alien abduction kind of viewpoint wasn't really prevalent in the 40s and 50s. It was more take me to your leader, or I'm going to give you a special message to help you spread or at least make some kind of movement that that makes the Earth or its leaders change its mind about its arrangement of weapons and its warlike mentalities. But the thing that I noticed about your book, and I found it, your writing style fascinating, and the way that, even though you didn't actually know these individuals back in the 40s and 50s, the way you collected the information and documented the information made it very credible. I highly recommend the book, by the way. It's called Contactees, A History of Alien-Human Interaction by Nick Redfern. How can they get the book, Nick?
Well, it's available at all good bookstores, Borders, Barnes & Noble, and all good online places like Amazon, etc. And, pretty much anywhere you can get a book, hopefully you'll be able to find it. So.
Excellent. Do you have a website?
It's published by New Page Books, which was published in December.
Do you have a website that you'd like to send people to?
Yeah, sure. My website is nickredfern.com, where people can find all the latest news and things I'm working on and investigations I've been doing, interviews with people. I do a lot of book reviews and things like that, and they're all at the website, and people can find out more about me and the books as well there.
Well, we'll talk about that several times tonight. We just like to get it out early so that people can be buying the book while they're listening to the interview. One of the things that I noticed about your choice of subjects, there was kind of a common theme with them. Almost without exception, they made a public statement, they morphed into some kind of energy guru, and then most of them were busted for cheating people out of money. Why do you think there is this modus of trying to make money from the assertion that they were contacted by aliens?
Well, I wouldn't want people to think that I think that's the case with all the contactees. What I think it is, it's the ones who basically took the wrong path that are the ones everybody talks about because they remember them. The ones who are sort of more down to earth and the stories are less sensational. They don't make as much, they're not as newsworthy, I guess. It's always like that. It's always like the bad penny that kind of comes to the fore, so to speak. Everybody remembers but fails to remember all the other people. But you're quite right. Most of the contactees, where, again, they differ with the abductees today, is that not only did they feel that they were on like a mission to spread the word, if you like, in simplistic terms, of the aliens they met, about how we should all live in peace and harmony with each other and disarm our nuclear weapons, rather than just relating that through books, magazine articles, etc. A lot of them felt compelled to set up, I guess, like mind, body, spirit type organizations and cult type groups and, places where people could come and listen to workshops and things like that. And which, on the one hand, isn't a bad thing, but it's when it crosses the line from doing it for the right reasons to getting into the realm where, it's kind of like taking the pension money of the little old ladies, who come to your meetings.
Right.
You need the money to help build a ship to fly to Venus, which unfortunately there were people like that in the movement, and a lot of people were defrauded out of their money. And I think, unfortunately, as I said, I don't want people to think that I'm considering that everybody falls into that category in the contactee movement. I certainly don't. I think it's a minority, but it's the minority, as I said, that gets remembered. But there are people, and there were people like that, and but then again, you get that. I don't think that's something typical to UFOs. Unfortunately, you get that in all walks of life. Whether it's somebody trying to sell a new product or anything. You get con men who take people's money. Unfortunately. So.
Oh yeah.
That's more about human beings, I think, than the contactee movement as such.
Yeah, I think the con men are moving up the ladder, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about George Adamski.
Yeah. Well, George Adamski was probably the ultimate contactee. He was, I guess, for people who are interested and know about the UFO subject, he was the one person back then and even now more associated with the contactee movement than probably anybody else. And he was born in 1891 in Poland and moved with his family when he was still a young boy to the US, and ultimately settled in Los Angeles. And in the 1930s, he set up an organization called the Royal Order of Tibet, which essentially was kind of like an alternative retreat type thing. Again, like a mind, body, spirit organization of the type that, today people would look twice at it. But, in the 1930s, in a city like Los Angeles, people did look twice. It wasn't the sort of thing you would see every